Hey everybody, it's Sarah from What's Next with Sarah, and I'm very pleased today to be speaking with Meg Bartlett from the Dream Axis, which is a podcast and a website. That's the name of the work, your business, the work that you do.
Actually, the podcast is called The Dream Axis, and my website is souldreamexperience.com.
Okay, got it. And Meg is a dream oracle. She reads dreams. She helps people understand what's happening with their dreams. And so is this kind of a window into a way that you just help people in general find their way, or is this very specific? Okay, let's talk to
It is more of a general way of helping people. It's really using dreams as kind of like a tool. I like to call them a tool that I use to help individuals. So it can tell me a lot about a specific person, and it can also tell them a lot about themselves. When I work with dreams, right, I always make sure that it really resonates with them, the meaning of the dream, because there can be many different meanings for all the different pieces that come up in a dream space, and every individual is unique. So I like to utilize their dreams as a tool to help them find their own internal wisdom and try and help them connect to that.
Excellent, excellent. And do you consider yourself a sensitive, a psychic, a intuitive? Yeah,
I do. Yeah. So I tap in. I don't know exactly what term I would use for that, but just very in tune with the earth and everything else that's happening around us. I think sometimes there's so much else to the human experience, right, than just being in this physical body. And sometimes I'll tap into other things, but I usually use that to help me guide my dream interpretations or my nightmare work with individuals. It can help me narrow down the focus of a specific life experience if I can feel. And it's interesting that you say that, because now I'm thinking, sometimes when I'm doing an interpretation or when I'm helping guide someone within their dreams, I will give them multiple options, and I can usually feel in some way when it resonates most for them. And then I'll stop and I'll be like, oh, is that what resonates for you? Right. And they'll be like, oh yeah, this, and then they'll dive into why it resonates for them. Maybe it's a memory or a part of their life story, or, it sparks a specific thought for them or something like that. And then we can go down that rabbit hole. And it's kind of like the universe guiding them through their own internal wisdom again. But I definitely use that in my work as well.
yeah. And I am just never not amazed at our internal wisdom and the guidance of dreams. It's just phenomenal. In fact, I was speaking to someone the other day, and we were having a session, and she started telling me about this dream, and she goes, oh, it was so frustrating. And I said, that dream just exactly mirrored where you told me you're at right now.
Yes. And that's usually the case too. People, sometimes our dreams can be so grand and fantastical and, like all over the place. And people are like, oh, I don't understand what it's saying. But when you start to really tune into it, you can say, oh, what was the emotion, right? The emotion and how you feel in the dream is really how I see dreams as a reflection of ourselves. It's not necessarily always based on the imagery. The imagery can help guide us to what you're thinking and feeling. But our emotions shape our reality. Like how you feel about something is probably going to be a little different about, than how I feel about something else. And so the way that we feel about the world around us and we connect with that emotional center is really what shapes our perceptions and our reality. And that's like so important in any type of dream work or even nightmares, right? Because that's an exploration of usually fear. But the emotion is really the key for it. And you can usually pick up on that and be like, oh, this is a reflection of, what you're experiencing right now.
Right. And do you find that people sometimes will have a series of dreams that maybe parts of it or sort of change or shift, but it's sort of like the same message trying to find its way to you? Or
yeah, I do. I love so much that you bring this up. I've started calling them, because I like to try and find terms not to limit the types of dreams that we're having, but to give people an anchor that they can hold on to for further exploration. And I try to leave them a little open-ended, but having a word to define something can really help some people understand more of what they're experiencing. So I like to call those progression dreams. And it's usually, I experience those actually. And that's really how I came into this work, was experiencing my own trauma. I started working with my own nightmares and things like that. And that's most of my background. And I I really dove into a progression dream. And so, for example, one of them that I've had is in my childhood home. And there's a lot of really dark memories that happened in that home, some really traumatic moments and experiences. And when I was in the middle of all of these like PTSD nightmares that I was having, like very chronic, consistent nightmares, wasn't really getting a lot of sleep. Sometimes I had sleep paralysis and it was really intense. You know, I was in that house, but it was really dark. And again, with the feeling, it felt so dark and just really saddened, you know, like there was a lot of emotion that was kept in that house within my dream space. And over time, as I've done a lot of my healing work, I can see it reflected. And so like the house had more sunlight in it eventually. And then, you know, I was able to laugh in the house, and then my brother came into it, right? And we were able to play as children in one dream. And you know, the relationship with my mom shifted in that house over time, which was really, really important to me in finding some sort of, you know, like understanding and release within myself. And very recently, I actually left that house behind in a dream. I moved my mom out of that house and I said, no, we're going to move somewhere else now. It's okay for us to leave this. And I had a dream where I was literally packing up all of her things and, you know, my things and my family's things. And I helped them move out of this house and we all said goodbye to it. And I woke up and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. You know, like just to see the progression over time of how that shifts. And I see that in my clients as well, right? Some of them will have progression dreams as well.
That's incredibly beautiful. So what was the timeline? Is that years? Is that a year?
Oh,
years?
Yeah, very years. Probably. So I moved out of the house in my dream space very recently, probably within the last like 2 or 3 months. That was like a big shift for me, but I started having those dreams probably about 8 or 9 years ago. So this is like a very long drawn out process. But using your dreams over time and observing them in that way can be really beneficial. It's almost like one of the ways I like to think about dreams as well is like a check-in. You know, it's like you're checking in with yourself like, oh, am I really progressing in the direction that I want to? There's no right or wrong direction, right? There's only the way that you want to go. And so if you feel like that resonates and you can see yourself, you know, moving in the direction that you want to over time, then I would say that's like a very successful progression dream, right? So.
Yeah, because that's a mirror of, you know, a lot of times we're making shifts and changes and we don't really see it, or they're very subtle. And so if you're getting those kind of affirmations through your dreaming, that's a wonderful way. I'm on the right path, or it's working or something, you know, that's nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it was you, I remember you said you started dreaming and you were like 6, or you remember dreams back to your 6. And so at what age were you when you really started working with them, your dreams?
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's all in retrospect, right? At the time when I was a child, I didn't know what I was doing. I thought everybody looked at their dreams and talked about their dreams and thought about their dreams this way. And it wasn't until I was probably within the last like 5 years or so, like very recently, that I realized people don't do that. And so, or it's not as common in Western society, right? And so I think over time, I've realized by revisiting some of those memories that my working with them back then is very different from how I work with them today, right? Today, I'm taking a very conscious, very aware approach to dream work because I understand its benefits and I've, you know, experienced it so much over time, and I can help other individuals with it. But at the time that I was like, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old, it was more like I was observing them. And I was using them in different ways. So I would observe my nightmares and I would try to talk to my parents about them, but they really didn't want to listen. And it wasn't necessarily safe to bring those up in my household. So I learned very quickly to keep those to myself. But I don't know why this thought is coming to me right now. This is so interesting. I haven't thought about this in years. I used to collect these little angels when I was a kid, like these little ceramic angels, and I had a whole collection of them. And I had a really old bed that had kind of like a shelf on the headboard, and I would like arrange these angels. And I would talk to them and I would tell them my dreams, and I would, you know, like just tell them about, you know, what I had dreamt, and like somehow I found comfort in that. I don't exactly remember if I was communicating with anything or not. But just speaking to those and interacting with them helped me to find a way to release the nightmares that I was experiencing, right? To share it in a way that was safe, even if it was only to these little ceramic figurines on my bedstand, right? But over time, I found myself referring back to them, and I started to see that they really were a reflection of what I was experiencing. And so even as, like I think about 12 or 13, middle school would have been when I started really starting to become aware of that. And then the whole time of my childhood, I used my dreams as a way to cope and escape. And so sometimes when children are not in a supportive environment, right, you have to have tools to work with what you're experiencing. And I was experiencing some very severe trauma, and it was very, very difficult for me. And I was not getting any of the help I needed. In fact, I was being denied, like, you're making this up. This can't be real. Stop talking about it. And I did what I needed to do to cope. And so I would daydream a lot. And so I had a very specific place that I would go to. I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, so a lot of it was Middle Earth based. And I would daydream, and then, I would guide myself into the dream space at night so that I could have pleasant dreams. And that's just something that I internally developed, that's a coping mechanism that I developed. But it is kind of common with children. Now looking today at some of the statistics and things that are coming out from therapists and psychologists, that is a coping mechanism for children who do not have other forms of support systems. So, I kind of look at it as a really good thing. My brain stepped in to take care of me when I really needed it to. And it did what I needed to get through that moment until I became an adult and then had the tools to do the work and move through that stuff. So,
yeah, the mind is so creative. And it's no accident that things like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings become huge at that age, right? Because there are things that we're battling, some more severe than others, that we don't quite have the tools yet. And that's beautiful that your psyche helped you to do that. So you do specialize in nightmares, is that correct?
Yes, I do. I like to say specialized, but I really just love working with them because I can change someone's experience just by having a single conversation, and help them to see nightmares in a different way. So if I could tell you something about nightmares, it would be that you can befriend them. Nightmares exist as a form of information to me, right? Like, this is my perception of it. That's not the end all be all. But I see them as a form of information that's coming through about some form of fear that you're experiencing or something that's dissonant in your life. So often we tell ourselves, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but really we might be hurting on the inside. Maybe it's really hurting us, but we're perceiving it as a burden to society. So we shove it down and we ignore it, even though we know that if we answer it, and if, sometimes it is difficult, but, maybe there's a relationship that's, really dissonant in your life, or a friendship that's falling apart and you don't want to acknowledge it. You don't want to let go. But it could be really draining on yourself and your spirit and your psyche. And so sometimes these dreams can come in as like conflict-based imagery. They can come in as violent imagery to, when I see violent imagery in a dream, it's usually indicating that there's pain that's felt somewhere. So it's a representation of pain in a very general sense, right? But nightmares to me are really showing us what is underneath the surface that we are not acknowledging. And if I can help someone acknowledge that and see their nightmares in a different way, then I've done my job well. And I love that work because I love to leave people with, what I do in my practice when I have a nightmare now, which thankfully I don't have very many anymore. So, but I've started thanking my nightmares. So I'll wake up and, you have the feeling of fear and the adrenaline and, you might be panting. And so I do what I need to in that moment to ground myself and bring myself back in. Maybe I turn on the lights. Maybe I go into my husband's room and just be like, hey, you need to sit with me for a second. I just had a really bad dream. And then I start to review it. What was this dream? Okay. What is it telling me about myself? What am I not acknowledging? And then I always say, thank you, nightmare, for showing me what I needed to know, because it is me telling myself something that I'm not acknowledging. So nightmares, I love working with them because they're a very common experience. People have them all the time from all different walks of life, from all different backgrounds, and they can be very impactful to start working with them and see them in a different way. It's helping to shift the perception of, fear-based imagery, but also, we're kind of pain averse in our society right now. And so it's a way to help us see and acknowledge the pain that exists within us so that we can do something about it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, it's almost like dreams are, it's just kind of a different channel of getting information, right? And
Yes.
for our brains, I mean, so as you're talking, I'm remembering I used to be a smoker. And sometime after I quit smoking, sometimes you're dreaming. I don't know if you ever smoke. You're dreaming that you're smoking. All of a sudden you wake up, you're like, oh my God, what did I smoke? Did I break my,
Yeah.
That was actually a nightmare for me when that used to happen. And it hasn't happened in many, many years. But my nightmares can take many forms, is my point. And
Absolutely.
and then I used to have, would I call them nightmares? They would be they were about work, and they would be about a person who worked there, and I would have a sense of panic. And as I began to have more and more of them, I realized, oh, that person is about to quit, or that person didn't show up to work. And then I began to just see that those nightmares were actually a warning to me. Just like, hey, that person's about to go, prepare yourself. And so that's a good example of how I could have just dismissed them as panic. But then as you begin to see over time, that's actually something that's trying to help me.
Yeah, there's that information source in there that you're telling yourself. And
Right.
and it's so interesting that you bring that up too, because there's so many different ways of picking up on all of the extra information that surrounds us all the time, right? So even if you were like, picking up on something energetically, it translated to you through your dream space to give
Yeah.
you that message. And it's interesting because as you were talking, I had the thought, and I don't think I've ever verbalized this before, but if you feel like you are not a spiritual person, or if you're looking for a way to connect to spirituality, or if you, are a person who said, oh, I don't have any gifts, I don't connect in any way, but I want to, your dreams are a form of connection, right? Like they are a spiritual experience, and they can be because you're connecting to yourself. And to me, I think that's all what, spirituality is really just connecting to yourself in your own form of source, right? Whatever that feeling is for you, right? Like it exists within every person, and through dreams or through any other type of work, you can connect to that piece of source. That was
I was
kind of a random.
conversation with somebody yesterday, because I have a client who's very frustrated that she doesn't feel spiritually connected. And I was suggesting to be outside in nature. But what you're saying is exactly true, that dreams are like a window into something bigger. And that's really what spirituality is, right? It's just when we connect that there's something bigger than ourselves here. And you're right. I mean, dreams are just a beautiful way to tap into that. And the more you
Absolutely.
pay attention to them, the more they show up, right? And the more you remember them, and it becomes, I talked to this woman the other day, and she said, I didn't know what to do. So I asked for a dream, and she got the most specific dream on what to do. It was just unbelievable. And that's a really good reminder of that. Before you go to bed, ask for information, ask for direction, ask for, is this the right house for me? Is that the right relationship for me? Where do I find my new job? Ask those questions and see what comes to you, right?
Absolutely. I love that you're bringing that up. I did that just last night, actually. I have a bedtime practice, but I don't always ask for specific dreams. Mostly I'm open to anything. But last night, I was like, can you tell me where I'm at in life? Because I'm in the middle of making some really big decisions with my business and my personal life. But I was like, I just want to know what I'm thinking, like my true self. And I think it's interesting because the dream space is, I like to say, in the way that I see it is it's operated by the subconscious. So we're going to talk about different types of awareness for a second. And the subconscious likes to bring together within the dream space the unconscious, kind of like those things those skeletons we put in the closet and the things we don't want to acknowledge and all those things under the surface, and our conscious waking selves. And so it brings them together in the dream space to collaborate almost in a way. And so you can take a piece of it with you into your conscious waking life. And one of the things that I had dreamt last night was, well, mostly we had gone to an event for my brother-in-law. He had like completed a course, and it was like a final project kind of thing that he was showing everyone within like music, right? So it was like a music performance. So I was mostly dreaming about that, but I could see the undertones of what I was asking within that. And there was a lot of me running around trying to organize all of these different things. I was trying to organize this person's stuff, and then I was trying to organize this person's life, and then I was, organizing all of these different things. And for me, I can see that as parts of myself, right? And I'm trying to organize all of these different things and find out where they're going. And as I woke up, there was a phrase on the tip of my tongue that was like, I'm weaving my basket. And I hadn't dreamt about a basket at all, but the phrase was there, you're weaving your basket. And I was like, oh, I'm weaving my life together, and I'm getting ready. And when you think about a basket, right, it's about like, you put things in it. So it's a space of receiving, and like I'm building up this ability to receive, which is something I've struggled with, throughout my life is, I'm so giving, but I need to be open to receiving, right? And so that I was just like, oh, I'm doing all this work in the background, and my dream is showing me that this is working. And it was just really great. So
weaving together all the different things that you're organizing, like you describe them as being separate, but as you begin to weave a basket, they come together. That's beautiful.
Yes, I hadn't even thought of that. Thank you for giving me that other piece as well.
That's really exciting. Well, we'll look forward to where your life goes.
I'm looking forward to it too.
Yeah, dreams are just they're so exciting. So you don't shy away from working with people who have had severe trauma?
No, because I have experienced it and I've come to some sort of a conclusion within myself. I wouldn't say I'm like, oh, I'm healed, because healing is an ever ongoing process. And I know that I'll be sitting with some of this for the rest of my life. But I'm in a space where I can accept that. And I think that's really what feels right for me. But because of where I've come from, I'm so passionate about helping other people who were in my position, right? Who had experienced something, even if their experience was completely different from mine, helping someone who is in that space of the feeling of it, right? The feeling of being so hopeless and just not knowing where to go or what to do. And, feeling that incredible amount of self-doubt and pain every day. I love working with those people. It's so personally gratifying. And it's my way of kind of making an impact on the world. If I can help one individual, it doesn't just help them, it helps everyone around them, right? Because we're all energetically connected to each other. Within my own family system, I'm connected to a bunch of different people. And when I light up a room, it lights up everyone else, and then they can light up their rooms and so on, right? So if I can make an impact with one individual and pull them out of something that's really, really dark, or help them see it in a different way so they can start their own journey, right? Then I love that work so much.
Yeah, that's really great. And so many people do need help. And so many people have had severe trauma that they haven't told to anybody. I mean, it's kind of, you don't get to be an adult without trauma, period. But some people have had much, much more severe trauma. I'm thinking two things as you're talking. One, I'm thinking of somebody I know who's a very, very accomplished psychic who grew up in a very abusive household. And then I'm thinking, listening to you talk, and sometimes, people are abused because they're seen as different, they're seen as other. And so it's like, do you have that ability before you were the traumatized person, or did that sort of come after? And I don't know the answer to that. I just was sort of thinking that as you were talking. And I know from my friend, the ability to connect with spirit is what absolutely saved him as a child during that time of abuse. He was able to open up and communicate like you did with your angels. And not everyone can do that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well, because there's different ways of connecting to something bigger than ourselves, right? When we're talking about that. And for me, I actually went through a period where I was very atheist. And I was very much like, there is nothing outside of this existence. You know, it was kind of like the anger coming through, right? The anger at everything in the universe for allowing everything to happen that I experienced. And it was just really interesting because even though I talked to my angels, right, I didn't see them as Christian angels, you know, or like anything tied to a religion. I saw them as something else, right? And like throughout my lifetime, religion has been something that I struggle with, right? I was raised in a very, very strict Roman Catholic household. Nothing against that religion or anyone who is Roman Catholic, but the way that I experienced it was not beneficial. And you know, coming around to this space of, you know, today I believe that there is something greater than myself, but it's not just greater than myself. I am greater than myself, right? And so there's this space within me, and dream work was really a way for me to connect to myself and find that power in being who I am, right? And like trusting myself and trusting my own wisdom and knowing that I carry this piece of the universe inside me. And so therefore, you know, it's kind of like wishy-washy, but like I am the universe, you know, and like kind of like that information, but that really aligned with me, and that's how I saw it. And dreams were the thing that led me into myself, which then allowed me to expand into a different spiritual view. So
that's fantastic. And, you know, yeah, nothing against any religion, but it is interesting that you found a way to, you no longer needed an interpreter, a priest or whoever to interpret the word. You were able to get your own direct access to it. And this is really crucial. And, you know, let's be frank, the church has harmed a lot of people.
Yes.
So that's just out there. That's really cool. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's really something. So, yeah, I'm kind of not sure where to go after that, because that's very empowering. So I mean, that's what you found, right? Your own self-empowerment through that.
Yeah. And the thought that's coming to mind right now too is I'm a lifelong learner. And so I'm constantly learning. Oh, this is a thought I had before we got on this call. This is something I actually wanted to talk about. It's coming back, right? So being a lifelong learner, right? Like exposing myself to so many different modalities. So after I had decided I was no longer Roman Catholic, I think actually it is kind of a funny story. I was 16 years old and my parents wanted me to get confirmed. And I did not want to get confirmed because when I was 16, I was like, I'm atheist, you know, like really just grounding into that. And my parents were really, really upset, right? Because that was not okay. I'm the oldest of my generation in that family. And so I had to set the stage for all of my cousins and siblings and everything like that. And I was like very adamant, like, I am not doing this. And my parents were like, you are doing this. And I was like, I am not doing this. And I think I came up with the phrase, I was like, well, and I tried to turn it back on them. To me, this is funny. It might not be funny to anyone else, but I was saying, well, isn't lying a sin? And my parents were like, well, yes. And I was like, so if I go up to the altar and I'm, you know, professing that I am becoming this, you know, like confirming myself into this religion, that's a lie. So I would be lying on the altar of God. And I like, you know, 16-year-old me was all dark and, you know, depressing. And I was like, I would be lying. And my parents are like, oh God. And then they were like, okay, you're going to cause a scene. And for them, it was all about the image of the family is what they cared about. So they allowed me to not get confirmed. But anyways, after that, I started exploring all of these different things. So I was like 16, 17, 18 years old. And I was reading books on Buddhism and books on, you know, Hinduism and all of these different types of religions, right? And I was just trying to see what else was out there because there's so many different ways that people experience spirituality in the world. There's no right or wrong answer, and there's no one answer as I see it, right? And so it was so interesting because I began to shape my own view of spirituality through learning about everything else. And so I would take bits and pieces and I would be like, ooh, this piece really resonates with me. I like that, but I don't really like the rest of it. So I would take one piece with me. And then I would say, ooh, this piece, you know, this is really nice. Actually, I like this whole section of pieces in this religion. And I would like kind of apply that. And then I would like mold them together and kind of figure out, how does that work for me, right? Like, what do I believe in based off of all of these different ideas? And by reaching out to those other ideas, it's sort of percolated in my brain and allowed me to start saying, okay, what do I believe in? Because now I have all of these different options, which when you think about the imagination as a whole, right, you're pulling from all of these different types of imagery. But the older you get, the more of a repertoire you have for imagery, the more things that you've seen. And so the more I was able to create my own spiritual base by the more repertoire I digested from all of the different information sources that I had picked up on. And so today, I think, to come full circle here, today, there's a lot of verbiage around like negative connotation around doing your own research, the phrase doing your own research. But I think it is so crucial to do your own research so that you can expose yourself to so many different thought forms so that you can choose what resonates and what feels right within yourself.
Absolutely. And as the more research you do, you find that more and more religions have a lot of similarities. And
absolutely.
That's something that can be very eye-opening and fascinating. I was talking to somebody the other day about this funeral that she had gone through, and I said, oh my gosh, this was just so similar to this Ojibwe funeral that I went to. And she's in California, I'm in Minnesota. She's talking about Tibetan Book of the Dead. I'm talking about Ojibwe people, and the similarities were just uncanny. And how does that, and Buddhism and it has similar laws in there. I think that one thing that can happen, I know sometimes it feels dicey to say this, but when you start to find your own way and really connect with your own spirit, you have your own internal right and wrong, and you have your own internal compass, and you no longer require that external saying, you can't do this or you have to do that. And of course, there's always aberrations out there. I'm not saying, but I'm saying in general, the more research you do, the more you become connected to your own spirit, you just know what's right or what's not right. And you just don't do that. You don't rip people off. You don't cheat people. You don't do it because your church is telling you not to do that. You're doing that because internally, you know that that's just not right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. The phrase that's coming to mind, and I've heard this somewhere else, but it's you are your own expression of the universe, right? The universe has how many different human beings on the planet, and that we're all put together differently, and we all have different experiences. And our souls, if you believe in past lives, have all experienced different lifetimes as well. So there's this massively different picture that creates each of us as individuals. And we all need to exist as ourselves because we are expressing different facets of the universe. So when you start to align with what your right and wrong is, even if it's not the right or wrong for someone else, it's your expression of the universe that you're owning and you're putting out into the world. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we exist. So
yes. And ironically, the more you do that, that comes from taking full responsibility for your choices. And
yes.
so if you're willing to be completely, like I have this friend, she's great. She was speeding along and she got pulled over, and her daughter was kind of in a panic. And she just said, I chose to go fast and I got a ticket and I'm going to pay for it. And don't worry, it's okay. And I just thought, how beautiful. She just said to her daughter, yes, I broke the law, but yes, I made that choice in this instance. And yes, I'm taking responsibility for it. So the more you're willing to take responsibility for your own life, your own choices, your own actions, the freer you become. And that's something that not everyone is ready for. The way you're talking about, I like to say, like, we each bring our own unique vibration to the world, that nobody else has the same vibration that you have, that I have, that my brother has, and we will harmonize with different people or resonate with different people. But, you could be, you could have a neighbor that you just have absolutely no resonation with at all. They're living in a completely world than you, and it looks like you're living on the same street in the same world, and you're just not. It's just it's fascinating.
Absolutely. And resonance, I love that you're talking about the frequency and the vibration and the resonance. All of those words sort of mean the same thing to me. but I love the resonance of voice in particular, like, because, you know, like your vocal cords are a manifestation of your thoughts into physical reality. You think something, you say it, and then it verbalizes, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen those studies where they have like a bucket of water or a bowl of water, and they make different sounds travel through the water, and the water turns into different shapes, and it'll have different types of ripples on the surface, and it changes over time, and all of these different things. And so you can see the impact of a type of resonance, a different type of frequency or vibration has a different shape on water. And so, you know, like our bodies, so this thought is just like, you know, our bodies are what, 70% water. And so what sort of an impact is your voice, its resonance having on someone else's body around you? And that's where, you know, like sometimes you'll listen to someone and it'll just like, you just cringe and you're like, I don't like that. And it's just because you're not aligned with that resonance. And some other people, you'll be really drawn to them and you'll be like, oh, I really love this. You know, I want to listen to more of what you have to say. And then you'll go down the rabbit hole and try to find more videos on them or podcasts or whatever it is, just so you can listen to what they have to say more. But I love the resonance of voice as well, because that's almost like, even if I have like this physical resonance of my body and we can interact with each other in the same space, the voice is very powerful because it's a physical manifestation of, you know, what's coming through me through thought and my soul and all of that. So.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought this up. I don't know if you know Gil Scott-Heron. He's a poet, musician who he died a few years ago, but my son got into him, and his last record, he had a very hard life, in and out of prison, junkie, blah, blah, blah. Very hard life. His last record, his voice is so tender and expressive. I mean, it doesn't even matter what words he's saying. His voice is so expressive of like this completely lived life somehow. And that's just, it's fascinating to watch how that can happen. If you listen to his first album, you don't think that. When you listen to his, you know, album 40 years later, you hear something so different in his voice. It's really very, very powerful. And I think about
Absolutely.
this. I do death doula work, and a lot of times people want to play music for people who are laying in their end of their days. And I always say, you know, I think an actual human voice would be much more preferable. I'm not saying it's wrong to play music for something, but there's something, but it's a different quality and a different human expression to have the voice of somebody who's right in the room, from, say, Dolly Parton, who I love. But you know what I mean? It's it's just I agree with you. It's a beautiful way to express, and the voice says so much about a person. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love what you were saying as well about the album that the man had, you know, his last album felt different than his first album, right? By the resonance of his voice. And so there's that shifting over time that can even happen in the way that you physically express your resonance. And it's interesting because recently, a couple of years ago, I had been following this podcast and they had a special guest on. And I had followed this, or I hadn't followed this individual, but this individual, I was like, I kind of like what they're saying, but it really doesn't resonate. And just within the last couple of months, this individual has been popping up for me again, but I resonate with them more. And so they've changed something, or I've changed, or we both changed into a space of like, okay, now this resonance is kind of aligning. I can listen to more of their content and not feel that retracted feeling. Now I'm interested. And, you know, sometimes I'll see a video pop up and I'll be like, oh yeah, I want to watch that. Let's listen to them today, you know? So I think that's so interesting because like there's that change of resonance over time, right? And that can be life experience, that can be your thought perceptions, that can be how, you know, like your own internal healing work, or just, you know, like how you exist in the world changes over time. And I think the other thought that's coming to mind is, if we don't change, right? And I'm bringing this up because there was a point in my life where I had expressed what I had been experiencing as an adult to my mom. And she said, I don't even know who you are anymore. You know, like you're just constantly changing. And I was like, but isn't that a good thing? Because if I'm not changing, then I'm not doing something right. You know, like the whole point is for me to expand and change and become this other individual, you know, and like, and I'm still myself, right? But like, I'm adding to it. I always want to add to it. I don't want to just sit there, stagnant and not changing. Like change is a process of life that we can't control, and going along with the flow of it, right, is like,
In fact,
going
I
along
think
with the change. And
become more of yourself. As you use the word yourself,
yes,
your expansion, you expand in all directions. And it's stunning how fearful people are of change. It really
yes,
is stunning. And I think somehow I can relate to it in my younger years, thinking like, but if I change, it means I was wrong. And thank God that got broken through at some point in my life, because for most of my adult life, I find it very exciting that I can just reinvent myself and keep changing. And this, I did this for 5 years, and okay, I'm done with that. Now what's next? I'm sort of the serial entrepreneur. And but as I was younger, that's the closest thing I can think of, is somehow that it meant that if I changed, it meant I was wrong somehow. And I don't know, but the fear of change is just startling.
yeah. I have been very close to, in my timeline of events, right, within my life. I'm still kind of pulling myself out of that phase of being afraid of change, and if I change, I'm wrong. I'm conquering that right now. So I'm in the middle of what you were just
Interesting.
describing at this point in my life. And at this point, my husband, bless him, he is so encouraging, right? But I need that encouragement, right? You need almost like a cheerleader to say, it's okay for you to change. It's okay for you to reinvent yourself. And like understanding that a change is a part of my marriage, like we are changing people. And how do you change with someone? Right.
Yeah.
And like that is an experience in and of itself, like understanding that you're both changing individuals, but like going along for the ride together and supporting each other through it has been really eye-opening for me. Especially because growing up, I was not necessarily supported in change.
Yeah.
So this is like a lesson I'm very much in the middle of right now. But
Oh, that's great that you shared that. And in a relationship, you don't always change at the same time. There's
yes,
a lot of back and forth. Um, but if you can hang with it, it's really beautiful.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Not everyone can, but there really is something to those relationships that we've had over multiple years, when you've seen each other change. And it doesn't even have to be a marriage, it could be a deep friendship also,
Yeah.
that just creates an expansive part of you, and it becomes that touchstone of like who you used to be and who you are and who you will be. And
Yeah.
it's really important as well. So it brings me back to, we kind of touched on this before, the idea of forgiveness. And
Mm,
I know this is really a big one right now. It really lights me up when I just see everyone saying, just forgive. And that's just not always that easy of a thing to do. And from
mhm.
my perspective, I found that as time passes and as I work on myself, forgiveness just kind of happens. And it's just kind of a grace that begins to happen. And it's not so important what happened, what the injury was, whatever it is that you think you need to forgive. And often I find that it's actually ourselves who are in the most need of forgiveness than anyone else. And I just know that something you've been thinking about, and I'm wondering if you would share your thoughts on it.
Absolutely. So I think I've already mentioned this to you, but for your listeners, I'm really averse to the word forgiveness. Not that like, I really hate the word, right? That's a very strong emotion. But in my upbringing, forgiveness was weaponized in my household. And so along with the Roman Catholic theme, there was a lot of, well, just say that you forgive them. And I've been thinking about this a lot this week. And so I've actually asked some other people in like the communities I'm a part of, what do you think about forgiveness? And so I've continued to develop this thought even just this week. And I realized that in the adults in my life when I was a kid telling me, oh, be the better person and just forgive them, even if you don't mean it, just say it. And it was almost like, this haughty feeling, like, oh, well, I forgave you, so I'm better. It really did not resonate with me. It felt really, well, it's fake, right? And so it's it's not, I don't know, it just really didn't feel in alignment. And I realized that it was a way for the adults in my life to tell me, your problems do not have space here. Just get over it already. And so I understand today why I am so averse to the word forgiveness. And it's because forgiveness for me, the word that I've, heard over and over throughout my lifetime, means we don't have space for you. There's no space for you to heal with this word, which is hard because that's the whole point of forgiveness, right? So it's kind of like, there was not being set up for success in that aspect, right, from a very young age. But also I can have that empathy now. I can see, wow, the adults in my life were really going through something, and that's not an excuse for them allowing some of the things to happen that did happen to me, but it's just, gives me a greater clarity of, it's so much more complex than just my experience, right? My experience was also the experience of all of these other people around me. And we were all going through something in our own way at the same time in the same house, right? So there was just a lot going on there. But forgiveness for me, and I think it's so interesting that you say that, because I am starting to understand that forgiveness really is time. Time heals all is kind of like the phrase that is said along with that. And for me, is sometimes, to be completely honest, I get a little frustrated with the time aspect. And sometimes, when I feel like, I want to be somewhere, even if I'm not there yet, I know where I want to be, but I don't feel it internally. And then I'm like, what am I doing wrong? What can I do more of? And I start running through the list of all the things I've learned, but I understand that I need to step back. And I just need to exist in time. And that's very difficult to understand, that you need to pull back in a way and just let it run its course. And I can't fix all of my problems, right? Like I can't morph myself into someone I'm not yet. And having that dissonance, right, is sometimes a little mind-boggling. But I don't know, the concept of the timeline pops up in my life in many different ways. So in the concept of forgiveness, this is here, but there are other times where as soon as I have a thought, it's like, boom, I want to manifest it. I just want to do this, this is going to happen and it's going to be this way. And when it doesn't happen on my timeline, my husband likes to step in and he's like, slow down. It's just not on your timeline. You're on a different plane here. And I'm like, okay, I got to bring myself back, but yeah, forgiveness really, really is about time. That's really pertinent.
Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking of your mentioning somebody whose voice that you couldn't listen to at one point, and then at another point you could, and how did they change? Did I change? Did both of us change? That's what happens over time too, right?
Yeah.
And as we pull our energy out of that situation and we bring it back to ourselves, and that creates that distance, and that allows you to see something differently, like you say. All the time I'm fascinated at the moment with how, this country was born out of, rejects and slavery and genocide. And most of the people who came over here came from wars, and they were in survival mode, and they came from famines. And, most people did not come here because their life was great somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think that, then all of a sudden you have like the 50s, where everyone had this like little house and the 2 cars in the garage, and
The American dream,
whatever, Donna Reed's sort of symptom. And there were all those secrets and all that brutality happening inside those little houses that wasn't shown to the outside world. And this is not to make an excuse for anything, but it's interesting to think about that bigger picture of how we were really a broken people that arrived here in the United States, and multiple generations acted out and suffered, and now here we are, and it's good to do this healing.
Yes, it's so interesting that you bring that up, because 2 things. One, the word, it's a time of reconciliation, popped into my head, which is interesting because that's also tied to like kind of the Christianity theme, reconciliation kind of thing. But also, there are sometimes people in communities that are like, I'm home, I don't know if you know the term star seeds, right? People who believe that they've had an existence outside of this human experience. aliens or other energetic beings or on a plane of existence or whatever. And they're like, oh, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm here is kind of what they're asking. And they're like, I want to go home, or I want to go to where I feel called to. I don't want to be here. The United States sucks. Like they're just very open about that. And it got me thinking, why am I here? Why am I here in the United States today? And why was I not born into a different culture or a different space in the world? And I believe it's because we are in a time of reconciliation with my ancestors, right? I am a white individual, and we came from, my family came from Germany and Ireland and some other European countries. And we're, like when white people came in, I mean, we really destroyed this land. We took over this land, and it's not ours to take. And there's this idea that, like there's been a lot of harm in the land itself, and there's been a lot of pain that's been driven into the land because we affected the land and her people and everything that's a part of the United States. And it's almost like I'm here now at a time of reconciliation so that I can help heal a piece of this space. It's very important for me to be in the space that I am trying to work, right? The physical location. I'm in the United States trying to help people, mostly within the United States, though I do have people that I work with outside of that, because I'm trying to help heal my corner of the world. What can I do to make a beneficial impact? And it's not to say that my ancestors were completely, not like wrong or evil or whatever it is, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So they just didn't know, but it's, my soul chose this time frame to come in so that I can help rectify some of the difficulties and some of the pain that, has been caused by my own DNA lineage, and things like that and how they've contributed. But I really believe that there is, this time is very important because we are seeing all of the things that have happened. We are becoming aware of all of the things that have happened. The Catholic Church came in and, really took Indigenous kids, and a lot of those Indigenous kids did not go home. And that is terrible. But, what can I do to make this world a better place in this time frame? And it's being here now in the middle of all of the stuff that's happening around us. And it's pretty crazy out there. But, like it's important for me to be here right now. So.
Yeah. To acknowledge it all, I think is just huge. And, I come back to our greatest gift we can do is heal ourselves. And the more we heal ourselves, it reverberates and it helps everybody around us. And that's like we talked about another conversation about kind of the family disruptor, the one who starts that process. And it can be very difficult for that person. You perhaps were that person in your family. And but this is what it takes sometimes. And yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're up to an hour here, but it's just so pleasant to talk to you.
Same.
A lot of subjects, so we're going to have to do more talking for sure. But people can reach you through your website, which is
souldreamexperience.com. You can find me on Instagram or TikTok. I also have my podcast, The Dream Axis, which is a free resource for, it's kind of like me working with clients to interpret their dreams and help them find guidance. But it's also a resource for you to listen to so that you can start to understand, what some parts of your own dreams might mean and how you might be able to see them from a different perception. So,
yeah. And I really enjoyed listening to it because it kind of walks you through how you pick apart different information and how you how you take it from beginning to end. I found very useful and helpful. So people will enjoy that, I'm sure. And I will definitely put it in the link as well. So look for Meg. She's going to be out at different events this summer. Look for her podcasts.
yes.
And again, thank you, Meg. Such a pleasure. And I wish you all the best on your weaving basket life.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was so wonderful to talk to you today.
Okay, we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
All right.